She came to clean his ranch, but what the lonely baron discovered changed their lives forever. Charles looked out over the ranch, where the sun baked the cracked land, mirroring his isolated heart. It had all fallen apart since his father's passing. The laughter that once filled the halls of the sprawling estate now echoed like a distant memory, and he felt the weight of drifting dreams and mounting debt. It was hard to watch the townsfolk leave for their daily routines, their joy a stark contrast to his quiet despair. On this particular day, a gust of wind swirled through the ranch as Maria pulled up in her rusty pickup. She stepped out, her heart pounding with the blend of apprehension and fierce determination. As a widow in her 40s, life hadn't been easy, but her 2 children depended on her. Brushing a wayward strand of hair from her brow, she took a deep breath and walked toward the house, ready to face whatever awaited her. At first, their interactions were strained. Charles was enveloped in his world of privilege, while Maria navigated the complexity of day-to-day survival. When they met, it was as if 2 planets collided. His title weighed against her needs, full of misunderstanding. Yet, amidst the dust and silence, as she swept the floors and wiped away the years of neglect, their moments cracked open to depth. "You should keep this picture," Maria said softly one afternoon, holding up an old photo of Charles and his father. "You can't forget where you come from." That simple reminder sparked something within Charles. He smiled, a flicker of warmth breaking through the chill. They began to share their stories, revealing their hopes for better tomorrows, dreams that felt almost too fragile to speak aloud. In that dusty room, they found solace. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue, but word of their friendship spread like wildfire, igniting whispers enveloped in prejudice. How could he? A baron and a custodian? The town sighed under the weight of expectation and judgment. Then came the day that changed everything. While Maria delivered groceries to Charles, a heated accusation flared, labeling her a thief. The room felt like it was spinning, voices pounding against the walls with fury. Charles stood in a poverty-stricken silence, discovering that he was short on courage and long on privilege. But when he saw the tears in Maria's eyes, honest, raw, and utterly bereft, the decision crystallized in his heart. Would he let silence suffocate what they had built together? As secrets unfurled, it became clear that Maria's legacy, much like his, was woven deeply into the fabric of this town. They were both tied to this community, yet each had known different struggles. The tension in the room thickened as all eyes turned to Charles, awaiting his response, a moment that could either cement his fate as a privileged baron or forge a pathway towards equality. Facing the crowd at the town meeting, he realized that the true battleground wasn't just for Maria's dignity or their friendship, it was for a chance to reignite compassion in a place thirsting for change. With his breath caught tightly in his chest, he prepared to speak. Would he seize the moment and fight against injustice, ushering in hope for himself, for Maria, and for the town? The answer hung in the thick Texas air, heavy with uncertainty, but brimming with the promise of transformation. Charles stood at the front of the town meeting, the air thick with anticipation, every gaze fixed on him like arrows. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down the back of his neck, a stark reminder of the tension in the room. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, skeptical and unsure. Maria stood off to the side, her face pale, yet fierce. The heart of his struggle lay right there, battling against the judgments that clung to their lives like a stubborn fog. That he cleared his throat, the familiar taste of uncertainty filling his mouth. "I know many of you are questioning my relationship with Maria." His voice wavered, but a flicker of determination ignited within him. "But let me be clear. What she does for me, what we have, is not born from obligation nor admiration of wealth. It's built on understanding and respect." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened, but others remained hardened by years of prejudice. Charles took a breath and pushed on. My father taught me that true worth lies not in titles, but in connections of heart. The words hung suspended, clearing a path through the noise that he turned to Maria, whose eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Charles's heart raced, he needed to bring her into this fight. Maria knows this land, this community, better than any of us. She has breathed life into places that had gone cold in neglect. The room fell silent as if the air had thickened. Then, one voice broke through. Hank, a farmer well respected in the town. But what does she know of running a ranch? And what can your friendship offer that'll change anything? Charles felt the heat of anger rise in him. It's not about how well she can run a ranch. It's about what we can learn from each other. Maria makes this place better. It's her spirit, her resilience that lifts us all. If we choose to divide ourselves by class, we'll all suffer. For a brief moment, the audience seemed to reflect. An old woman whispered to her neighbor, a young man nodded slightly. The doubt that once held them captive was beginning to bend under the weight of possibility. I need you all to see, he continued, his voice steady, we are stronger together. Can we not create a future that reflects our shared struggles instead of our separate ones? We have the opportunity to transform this place, to build a new story for our children. Encouragement flickered in the dim light, but the shadows still lingered. There were those who might not accept this change. Then, as if the tension was too much for one woman in the crowd, she stood up, rage simmering beneath her words. And what about tradition? You can't just tear down what has always been done because of some fleeting friendship. Charles felt a tightening in his chest. Tradition? Was it so wrong to challenge it? Tradition built walls. We need to build bridges. This town deserves more than stagnation. A ripple of doubt and curiosity swept through the crowd, whispers swirling like leaves in the wind. Charles could feel a shift, but uncertainty still loomed. Had he done enough? As the murmurs swelled, Maria approached him, her presence solid, anchoring his wavering heart. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible but full of conviction. Would he find the strength to continue this battle for their intertwined destinies? Or would the walls rise too high to conquer? The questions lingered in the air, thick with the promise of change or the threat of retreat. Charles's heart raced as he scanned the crowd, feeling the weight of their uncertainty pressing down like a storm cloud. Though doubt loomed still, there was a glimmer of hope sparking in some eyes. Listen, he said, his voice cracking a little, but he steeled himself. Change doesn't come easy, but it often comes through the voices we least expect. Just look at Maria. Maria stood beside him, grounded yet anxious, and he could see the mixture of admiration and fear in her eyes. She was the embodiment of everything he wanted to share, and he could sense the townsfolk grappling with the realization that perhaps she was more than just the help, yet, in the back, gruff whispers clung tightly to tradition. It's not enough to just want change. Someone barked. What will it mean for us? Our way of life. The echo of their concerns reverberated in the room. Charles felt the anger bubble inside him again, but he pushed it down. But isn't that the point? He said, raising his voice slowly but firmly. Change is scary, it's frightening because we worry about losing what we know. But at what cost? What if hanging on to those old ways is what keeps us trapped? A murmur of agreement broke out from a few in the back. Others remained skeptical, hands stiff at their sides. We have to think about our families, our children, a woman interjected, her eyes narrowing. Change can be a risk. Charles sighed. But so is the status quo. Maria is a part of this community, just like you and me. She sees potential where many of us see limitations. Can we not learn from that? The murmur of voices surged again, and for a moment, he feared the tide had turned against him. But then he caught Hank's eyes, still fierce but with a hint of consideration. Well, if we're in this together, what do you propose, Charles? Finally an opening. Charles felt the ground shift beneath him. We start by listening. Just as Maria can learn about ranching, I can learn about your struggles, the history of this community. We can talk about what we want for the future. Maria placed a hand gently on Charles's arm, as if she was lending him her strength. I've been out there, seen the challenges. I know this land, how it breathes. Together, I believe we can make it flourish, create something lasting, she added, her voice gaining volume and confidence that he saw farmers lean closer to each other, talking in understated tones, glances shifting from him to Maria. The tension in the room began to soften, like the first hint of spring thawing a long winter, but then, from the corner of the building, an unexpected voice cried out. And what's your plan for the future, then? Just words. Empty promises. It was a younger man, filled with disbelief and defiance. Charles squared his shoulders, feeling the old embers of challenge flare within him. It starts with conversations. Building trust takes time, but it's laid in small acts. Together, we might even rediscover a sense of community we've lost. The words took root in the air, hovering, as people exchanged glances, some uncertain, others intrigued. But behind his own resolve lurked a personal fear. What if they never believed in this potential? Just as he steeled himself for that very question, a commotion broke out near the entrance. A figure stepped through the door, breathless and agitated, what looked like a letter clutched in hand. Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this, she gasped, her expression mixing urgency with alarm. The crowd fell silent, collectively hanging on the stranger's words. Charles felt a ripple of dread wash over him. What news had arrived that could change everything he just fought for? With each passing heartbeat, the air crackled with possibilities. What lay ahead could alter their fates forever. The woman at the door took a deep breath, her eyes darting across the room, searching for someone, anyone to react. Holding the letter tight, her fingers trembled as if the weight of its contents could crush her. Please, just listen, she implored, looking directly at Charles, her voice wavering with urgency. This is about the ranch. The banks are discussing a new policy on loans and land ownership. It's going to affect everything. You're all going to feel it. His heart dropped. The apprehension among the crowd surged again, a palpable tension that stifled the room's atmosphere. What do you mean? Charles asked, his voice wavering strangely. He knew he needed to stay calm, but the stakes felt alarmingly high. The woman nodded, almost to herself, gathering strength. They're tightening regulations. If you have a risky farming practice, they'll pull your funding. A lot of people might lose their land. Gasps rippled through the crowd, a wave of anxiety washing over even the most stoic faces. Charles glanced over at Maria, her expression mirrored his own, a mix of fear and disbelief. Here they had been talking about community and change, and now it felt as though the ground was crumbling beneath their feet. A murmur of outrage started in the back, quickly escalating. This can't be happening. This is our livelihood. We can't let them do this. This is our home. Voices cried out, the once cautiously expectant crowd now ignited with anger. Everyone! Let us focus! Charles shouted, desperation creeping into his tone. He couldn't let this panic derail everything he tried to build. We can't let fear get the best of us. We need a plan together. Together? Someone yelled skeptically from the back row. How can we come together if they're forcing us apart? We can't even rely on our own land anymore. That's exactly why we need to unite, Charles replied, his voice steadying as he sought that flicker of hope inside himself again. If the banks are coming for us, then our only chance is to stand as one. Let us figure out what we can do, what we can fight for. Maria stepped forward, fierceness in her eyes. Charles is right. Land is not just dirt, it's our history, our home. But if we don't take action, we risk losing everything. One by one, eyes began to shift, looking from Charles back to Maria and then around at each other. They were connecting, unsure yet pulling together. Just then, Hank rose, an unwavering presence in the chaos. So what's our first step? He asked. His voice cut through the noise like a strong saw carving its way through wood. A silence fell again, thick but heavy with anticipation. It was now or never for Charles. He could feel time and pressure pressing down on him. This was more than just about land, it was about their futures. I propose we gather a meeting, open dialogue with the banks. We voice our concerns and demand transparency, Charles said, his voice stronger than he felt. We need to show them we are not just farmers. We are a community, and we won't stand for this. The crowd shifted, contemplating, while some nodded thoughtfully. It wasn't just the fear of losing their land anymore, it was about their identity, their future as a community. Hope ignited a small flame amidst the confusion, and Charles felt it swirl around him, a collective breath almost ready to unleash. Then suddenly, the woman who had delivered the news took a step closer. If you need help organizing, I can bring you the contacts at the bank, she offered, her eyes a mix of determination and caution. Charles felt the air change, it was electric. This was the moment he had sought, the synergy of voices coming together in search of a better tomorrow. But even he felt a nagging thought: if they pushed against the banks, what kind of backlash could come? As he weighed the risks, the room shifted again, energy crackling. They stood at the edge of something monumental. Are we ready to stand up for what we believe? Charles asked, scanning the room, knowing many had lost faith but might just find it now. The echoes of silence fell heavy again, a prelude to something that could reshape their lives. And just as a chorus of uncertainty was about to break, he felt a press of sizzling energy. Ahead lay the unknown, and that truth loomed larger than fear. What happens if they don't listen? Maria whispered beside him, an anchor amidst the rising tide of hope. His heart beat faster. That question lingered, heavy and sharp, as the crowd pondered the nature of risk and resilience, standing at a precipice, ready to leap. The atmosphere in the room was thick with uncertainty, yet tinged with a spark of defiance. Charles stood at the front, heart pounding against his chest, the weight of leadership resting heavily on his shoulders. Around him, the faces of his neighbors were illuminated by a mixture of desperation and determination. It was a strange, heady blend. Let us reach out to people who've been through something like this before, Hank said, breaking through the silence. I remember hearing about a town that fought back against predatory banking practices. They made the banks listen. His voice was steady, laced with experience, and it hung in the air like a lifeline. Do you think we could pull that off? Someone else mused, skepticism threading through their tone. We're just little farmers. What do we know about fighting banks? Charles felt the warmth and weight of Maria's hand on his arm. We know what they're trying to take from us. We may be farmers, but we're also mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. This is our home. An eruption of murmurs ensued, some agreeing, others still doubtful. Yet, within that din, the flickers of hope began to grow brighter. Okay. So how do we even start? A young farmer named Jake asked, his brow furrowed. We can't just march into the bank and demand answers. We start by gathering our stories, Maria suggested, her voice ringing clear. We need evidence. Every one of us has worked hard, poured our blood, sweat, and tears into these lands. If we can present our struggles, they'll see who we are. As the crowd mulled over her words, Charles felt a shift. They weren't just talking anymore, they were beginning to forge connections. Feelings replaced by purpose, faces shifted from despair to determination. Let us meet tomorrow, Charles announced, feeling more confident. Plant our feet firmly in this fight. We can gather the stories, organize everything we need, and come back to discuss strategies. The nods and murmurs of agreement surged again, growing stronger with each moment. Hope was spreading, and it felt alive, almost electric. Maria leaned closer, her voice a soothing whisper. It's not just our land at stake, Charles. It's our way of life. Her eyes searched his, urgent yet calm, as if she held secrets of strength within her gaze. But can we really go against them? He whispered back, almost afraid to voice his doubts. Sometimes you only find out who you are when you're pushed to the edge, she replied, her resolve unwavering. With that statement marching through his mind, Charles looked around the room. Friends, neighbors, faces he'd grown up with their futures entwined. It was more than just the land they were fighting for. It was love, family, community. As they all began to disperse, the woman from the door approached Charles once more, her demeanor changing, softer. I'll help organize the meeting with the bank. They need to know we're coming. Thank you, he breathed, his heart swelling with gratitude. Yet still, doubt tugged at him, a nagging whisper. If they fought back, would it lead to brutal retaliation? Would they provoke even greater dangers? The uncertainty felt heavy. And as the crowd trickled out, chatter flowing with renewed purpose, he found himself seized by a feeling he hadn't held for a long time, hope. But then an unsettling thought crossed his mind: were they truly ready to face what lay ahead? What if the powers that be turned against them in a way he couldn't anticipate? The question spiraled, planting seeds of worry in the fertile ground of their newfound resolve. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving him in the dim room filled with echoes of determination. Tomorrow held possibilities laden with both threats and opportunities. In the center of this unwinding struggle, he felt a pulse of energy. They were about to step out of their comfort zone into a storm. Would it all be worth it? And as they prepared to gather their voices, would that chorus ring loud enough to be heard? Morning broke slowly over the valley, pale light filtering through the clouds, a soft reminder of a new beginning. Charles tugged on his boots and stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air, mixed with the scent of damp earth and promise. Today, he felt the weight of their collective intention. They would gather their stories. They would be heard. As he made his way toward the community barn, he was struck by how familiar the path felt, yet how different it had become. This wasn't just a stroll through fields anymore. Each step echoed with purpose. Stray thoughts of doubt flickered in and out, but he pushed them away. There was no room for weakness today. When he arrived, the barn was already bustling. People gathered in clusters, some sharing cups of coffee, others flipping through notes hastily scrawled. Their faces, once clouded by uncertainty, showed signs of resolve. Charles spotted Maria in the far corner, her hands animatedly gesturing as she spoke to a few more hesitant neighbors. "Hey!" he called out, a burst of excitement building in his chest. Maria turned, her smile brightening and dispelling the lingering unease that clung to him. "We're just getting started. I've organized everything. It's time to share. Everyone has a story worth telling." Taking a breath, Charles stepped forward, calling them all to attention. The chatter faded, replaced by the static hum of anticipation. "Thank you for showing up. Today is about us, the struggle we face, the lives we've built, and what we're willing to do for them. Every voice counts." As he spoke, Charles noticed his heart racing, each word pulling them closer to a shared purpose. Neighbors began stepping forward, reluctant but empowered. They spoke of farming hardships, of loans and debts that threatened their homes, of late nights filled with worry. Old Mr. Jensen, with his weathered hands clutching a faded hat, shared how the bank had pressured him relentlessly. "I've spent my life on this land. I won't let anyone take it from me." The sheer emotion in his voice resonated in the crowd, igniting a fire. One by one, they spoke. Each narrative was a thread woven into the fabric of their community. By the time Maria stood up, eyes glistening with unshed tears, the room was thick with shared pain and unwavering unity. Her voice carried strength. "We've all given so much to this land. It's our history, our legacy. We may be afraid, but we need to stand united. Together, we are stronger than we realize." A murmur of agreement spread through the barn. Hushed voices gained momentum, transforming into empowering shouts of determination. Charles felt a surge of pride swell within him. They were no longer just neighbors, they were a movement, but as the fire of hope roared brighter, Charles also felt the shadows creeping closer. He remembered the warnings he had heard. The bank's threats loomed large over their resolve. A sudden knock echoed on the barn door. The energy shifted. Faces turned as the door creaked open. In stepped a figure dressed sharply in a suit, holding a briefcase. The room fell silent, a collective gasp lingering in the air. "Good morning," he said with an air of calm authority. "I'm here from the bank." Fear prickled at the edges of Charles's confidence. Would their plans unravel before they'd even begun? The moment of truth had arrived, but what fight lay ahead? Would their newly forged unity withstand the pressures of the very institution they were challenging? He exchanged glances with Maria, and her expression mirrored his own concern. As the stranger stepped deeper into the barn, hearts raced, and the collective breath of the community held tight. What would happen next? And could they withstand the storm that was about to be unleashed? The stranger stood at the entrance, the sunlight spilling behind him, casting an imposing shadow. His tailored suit felt out of place in the rustic barn, a stark contrast to the weathered jeans and flannel shirts that surrounded him. Charles could feel the tension rising in the air, anticipation mixed with anxiety. The speeches had lit a fire, but this man threatened to extinguish it. "Is this where the community gathers?" the banker asked, his voice smooth and deliberate. Charles stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Yes, it is. We all have concerns about the bank's dealings with our farms." "Concerns, yes," the banker replied, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I've come to discuss some urgent matters with your group. I won't take much of your time, I assure you." Maria stepped beside Charles, her hands clenched into fists. "We know what the bank wants. We're not backing down without a fight." The banker's gaze flicked over the crowd, absorbing their defiance. "I commend your spirit. But this is not a fight you can win." His tone was too calm, too rehearsed. The way he dismissed their unity with a wave of his hand sent deep chills down Charles' spine. "What do you mean?" someone from the back shouted. "You think we'll just let you take our homes?" The banker cleared his throat. "All I'm saying is, a tough decision lies ahead. Many of you are behind on payments. The bank can only extend so much leniency." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Charles felt his pulse quicken. He had seen the struggle etched on their faces, each person a vital thread in the tapestry of their community. "We're not giving up," he said firmly. "Your threats don't scare us. There are ways to solve this." The banker started, his voice easing back into its calm facade. "Reorganization is one option. But you'll need to compromise. Sell some land, let go of excess properties. I can help with that. Trust me, it's better than losing everything." His words hung heavy in the barn. The thought of selling family land, of breaking promises to those who came before them, sent waves of panic coursing through the group. Murmurs erupted, voices rising in a crescendo of worry and disbelief. "Compromise?" Maria echoed, her voice cutting through the noise. "Why should we trust you? You don't care about our community. You only care about profits." The banker leaned closer, his expression shifting, the smile fading. "I understand your anger, but this isn't personal. It's business. You'll need to face the realities of your situation. The bank will make an example of those who refuse to adapt. And trust me, this community will be implicated." The murmuring grew louder. Charles felt a wave of protectiveness swell within him. "No one is going to be taken away without a fight," he declared, staring directly at the banker. But behind that grand resolve, doubt lingered. Could they really stand united against such an onslaught? The banker straightened, flicking open his briefcase to reveal a stack of papers. "Well then," he said, a satisfied glint in his eye. "Start outlining your plan of action, because if things don't change fast, I assure you, I'll be back to take what is legally mine." Charles felt the air grow heavy as the banker's words settled among them. If they didn't act now, their unity could easily disintegrate into quiet despair. As the banker stepped outside, the energy in the barn shifted. The community whispered among themselves, confusion and fear mingling with determination in the air. Charles looked at Maria, feeling the heat of rising urgency. "We can't back down. Not now. We're stronger together." But as the clock ticked and hope flickered, he wondered, what strategy could they devise against such a relentless adversary? And how far were they willing to go to protect what was theirs? The answers loomed just beyond their reach. Would they rise from the ashes of despair, or would they be consumed by the very forces threatening to tear them apart? The feeling of impending doom weighed heavily on Charles's chest as he scanned the worried faces of his neighbors. Fear and uncertainty were like vines, wrapping tightly around their once vibrant spirit. The banker had left his mark, and it felt like an anchor was dragging them deeper into despair. "Listen up," he called, raising his voice above the hushed conversations. The room fell silent, every eye locking onto him. "We've faced tough times before. This isn't our first storm, and it won't be our last. We can't let ourselves be divided by his threats." Maria nodded, her fierce spirit igniting a spark among the crowd. "We need a plan. We need to understand our options. We can't leave it all to a piece of paper in a briefcase." An older gentleman named Mr. Jensen, who had tilled the land long before most of them were born, stepped forward. Lines of worry etched across his weathered face, but also a glimmer of determination. "She's right. We can educate ourselves about this mess. We need to gather information, maybe talk to a lawyer. Knowledge is power." "Right," Charles agreed, heartened by the sudden swell of energy. "But we also need numbers. If we want to fight back, we must stand together. Let us set up a meeting, invite everyone, brainstorm our options." A collective nod swept through the room, the fears shifting slowly to resolve. This was a chance, a path they could follow together. Charles felt a sense of solidarity wash over him, like the warmth of the sun breaking through a cloudy day. As folks began to disperse, chatter buzzed with determination. They were ready to lean on each other, to rally together. Amidst the noise, Maria pulled Charles aside, her voice lowered. "What happens if this doesn't work? What if he comes back and we're still not ready?" He searched her eyes, seeing the flicker of vulnerability in her normally fierce demeanor. "Then we'll get ready. We'll fight as hard as it takes. We may need to take risks, but we can't just roll over and let him take what's ours. Promise me we won't lose this fight," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I promise," he replied, squeezing her hand tightly as they exchanged a determined look. Night fell, and the barn transformed into a beacon of hope, light strung above casting warm glows over gathered families, friends, and neighbors eager to plan their next move. But even with the support surrounding him, Charles felt a gnawing tension in his gut. What if this was just the calm before an even greater storm? What if the banker's threats weren't just bluster? As they brainstormed, ideas began to take shape: fundraisers, community events, even a petition. Each thought igniting a spark of unity that stretched across the group, but as he sat back for a moment, watching the camaraderie grow, the imagery shifted in his mind. The banker returning, not only to demand what he thought was his but to destroy their very way of life. A foreboding thought that gnawed at him relentlessly. The night wore on, laughter mingling with ideas, but not far from anyone's mind was the reality that stared them down. As the discussion finally wound to a close, Charles took a deep breath, unsure of his next words. "Tomorrow, we band together, and we prepare. But this isn't just about our homes, it's about our hearts, our future. We can't forget that." Cheers erupted, but behind those cheers lurked the unspoken fears. It was a facade of strength, a desperate dance of hope. As Charles turned toward the fading light outside, a vehicular rumble caught his attention. A black SUV pulled up, and the unmistakable figure of the banker stepped out again. "Guys," he called, voice urgent, he's back. Panic rippled through the barn, and uncertainty loomed larger than before. Were they ready for the confrontation to come? Would their unity hold strong in the face of a challenge that felt insurmountable? The stakes were higher now. Could they find the courage to fight back against the darkness encroaching on their bright future? Or would fear send them scurrying back into shadow? As the front door of the barn swung open wider, the cold blast of night air rushed in, chilling the mingled warmth of hope that had just been fostered. Charles stood frozen, heart racing as he took in the sight of the banker striding confidently toward them. The man appeared both daunting and smug, his black suit stark against the rustic backdrop of the barn. "What do you want?" The words came out as a sharp whisper from Charles, but he couldn't hide the tremor underneath a mixture of fear and defiance. The banker flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I've come to remind you all of your obligations, and the consequences of ignoring them." Whispers erupted in the barn, confusion and trepidation spreading like wildfire. Maria gripped Charles's arm tightly, and he could feel her pulse racing against his skin. "We're gathering together to discuss our options," Charles finally managed, gathering the threads of courage he had found just moments before. "You can't intimidate us. We're standing as one." "Oh, I wouldn't dream of intimidating anyone," the banker drawled, leaning against the doorframe as if he owned the very land they stood upon. "But I do intend to remind you that this isn't just about land and homes, it's about contracts, legal obligations that you seem to have forgotten." His words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Charles felt the silent glances exchanged around him, doubt creeping back in. Had their gathering meant anything if the banker could shoot them down with mere words? "Your threats won't work here," Maria stated, her voice breaking the tension. "We're ready to fight back and stand our ground." "And fight you shall," the banker replied, a hint of malice in his tone. "But don't forget, I have the power of the law behind me. Turn the community against me, and I can just as easily turn the law against you." A collective gasp filled the room. The threat of litigation loomed over them like an impending storm, and the reality set in. "What do you want from us?" Charles demanded, his own voice carrying a tremor now. He realized this was more significant than he ever intended. "Simple," the banker said, straightening up, his posture now commanding. "You pay up, or I close my eyes to your little rebellion and let nature take its course." Charles felt the strength he had built just minutes ago begin to sway. There were lines etched now on his neighbors' faces, a stark contrast to the prior hope. But deep down, he remembered Maria's fierce resolve, and he felt it stir in himself again. "Unless you're willing to discuss this civilly," he said, heart pounding, "we won't back down. We need time to educate ourselves. We'll seek legal counsel, we'll assemble everyone to solidify our stance." The banker laughed, the sound dripping with condescension. "Time has never been on your side, Charles. But by all means, you can squander what little you have left." With a final nod, he turned on his heel and sauntered back to his SUV, leaving a thick veil of uncertainty and tension hanging in the air. As the vehicle bumped along the dirt road, the collective breath of the crowd seemed to quicken in sync, hearts longing to reclaim their confidence, but uncertainty laced every breath. "Now what?" someone whispered, fear cracking their voice. Charles stepped forward, heart racing but head held high. "Now we prepare. We find that lawyer, we educate ourselves, and we reach out for help. But we need each other to do this." Maria stepped beside him, her eyes glistening with determination. "And we won't let his threats cage us. Not now, not ever." As the barn filled with renewed resolve, the group gathered closer, plotting like warriors before battle, fervor igniting once more. But in the back of Charles' mind, the danger lurked. What if this was only the beginning, and the banker had more tricks up his sleeve? Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Charles knew they had to move quickly. The clock was ticking, and they needed to act fast before the banker turned their hopes to ashes. Would they be able to overcome the odds? Or was fate already sealing their doom? The morning sun rose with a golden promise, spilling light across the ranch and warming the hearts of those determined to fight. Charles stood and gazed out at the familiar land, feeling a sense of duty pulsate through him. Today was not just another day, it was the dawn of change. Inside the barn, the community had gathered once more, faces filled with renewed purpose. This was it. They were ready to confront the challenges ahead. Maria stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his forearm, a reassuring anchor amidst the whirlwind. Her strength inspired him to seize this moment. "All right, everyone," Charles called, projecting confidence as he faced his neighbors. "We've rallied together before, and today we stand united against the threat looming over our heads. We refuse to be weak. This is our land, our home." A roaring cheer erupted, resonating with energy that coursed through the barn. "We need to gather all the stories we can," Maria added, stepping forward. "Each of us brings a unique experience. We've all faced hardship, so let us compile our histories. We'll show just how much this land means to us." The crowd murmured in agreement, a fire igniting in their hearts as they began discussing their individual contributions. Each voice was a thread weaving a tapestry together. They were impenetrable. As they began organizing, Charles felt a wave of gratitude. He looked over the familiar faces, realizing that what once felt like an ever-looming isolation was now filled with the warmth of community. They were transforming before his eyes, breathing life into hope where despair once took root. Slowly, plans unfolded. Some members suggested reaching out to local activists to gather support, while others explored the idea of forming a coalition with neighboring farms. The energy surged and filled the barn. It felt like a family reclaiming their legacy. Just as the excitement peaked, an unexpected visitor entered, the banker's shadow trailing closely behind him. The man strode in confidently, but something felt different this time. Charles met his gaze with newfound resolve. "We're getting organized," he stated, a surge of determination invigorating him. "Oh, I see," the banker replied, casual as he flipped through his clipboard. "But let us be realistic here. You know I have the law backing my decisions." "Then let us discuss the law," Charles shot back. "We're ready for a fight, but this isn't merely about compliance. It's about our people, our rights." He felt Maria beside him, the connection steadying him. The banker smirked, but Charles could see a flicker of uncertainty flash momentarily in his eyes. The tide was shifting. "Are you certain you want to take this on?" he challenged, attempting to regain control of the atmosphere. "Yes," Charles said without hesitation. "We're not just a collection of farmers. You will see us emerge as a consortium of voices that cannot be ignored. We're more than titles or old prejudices." The crowd erupted into applause. "Let us meet with you at this civilized discussion of yours. Together, we will make our case. Together, we will win." The banker hesitated, his cool demeanor cracking just slightly. "Very well. A meeting, but don't expect to intimidate me with fancy speeches." As he left, a heavy silence settled over the barn. Charles could feel the collective heartbeat of his neighbors. They were ready for this fight. They would push back against oppression. Encouraged by this united front, Maria surged with inspiration. "We need to prepare as if our lives depend on it, because they do. Let us meet every evening and plan our strategy." Charles nodded, meeting her fierce gaze. "Yes. Knowledge is power. We'll bring in experts, gather signatures, create a community fundraiser. This is our future." Even as bravado surged through their plans, worry nagged at Charles. Would all this be enough? As he locked eyes with Maria, he sensed something profound. Their bond had grown deeper, pulling them both into the heart of this battle. Together, they would face each rising threat. The days turned into weeks, with every sunset painting hope across the horizon. After tireless nights filled with strategizing, they stood before the bank with a powerful coalition of farmers, activists, and townsfolk. Charles spoke again, fully genuine, driven by passion. "This isn't just about land, this is about our dreams, our children's futures. If we want to thrive, we can't succumb to fear. We rise and reclaim our voice." The crowd erupted into applause, affirming that they were ready to fight, to bring about change. After multiple discussions, they reached an agreement with the bank, not just a compromise, but an opportunity for new beginnings. While there were still shadows trailing their progress, it felt as if they had torn down walls built on prejudice and fear, brick by brick, heart by heart. As cheering resonated and tears were shed, Charles turned to Maria. Their eyes met, full of respect and gratitude. They had forged strong connections, transformed hearts, and ignited a community. It wasn't just about land anymore. It was about love, resilience, and daring to believe in a brighter tomorrow. The ranch stood proud, a symbol of triumph, and as he took her hand with newfound strength, he realized life had shifted in ways he never thought possible. Together, they had rewritten their story, planting roots in the heart of the community surrounding them. "Thank you," she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You believed in us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, illuminating the night in warm hues, the question hung in the air: what other change can they create together? The future felt wide open, ready to be seized. Now more than ever, they understood the importance of unity. They had transformed their lives, and together, they would continue to evolve as a community, and just like that, Charles felt hope blossom, a fully flourishing thing. If this story touched your heart, don't hesitate. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like right now to feed the algorithm, and show your support. We want to hear from you. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Do it. Don't wait not even one more second to help us spread this positivity and community spirit.